The man most closely associated with the formal development and institutionalization of apartheid in South Africa is Hendrik Verwoerd. He was the Prime Minister of South Africa from 1958 until his assassination in 1966, and is often referred to as the architect of apartheid due to his role in shaping and implementing the policies that created the apartheid system. Hendrik Verwoerd's background birth. He was born on September 8, 1901 in Amsterdam, Netherlands. Family origin: Verwoerd's family emigrated to South Africa when he was 2 years old, settling in the Orange Free State. They were Dutch by origin, and Verwoerd grew up within a deeply religious and Afrikaner nationalist family. Education: Verwoerd was a highly educated individual. He studied at Stellenbosch University in South Africa, where he excelled academically and earned multiple degrees, including a PhD in psychology. He also pursued postgraduate studies in Germany and the United States. Funding for education. There are no clear public records indicating a specific individual or organization that funded Verwoerd's education. However, it is known that he received scholarships for his academic excellence, particularly from Stellenbosch University. Family and children. Hendrik Verwoerd was married to Betsy Shumbi, and they had 6 children: Wouter Verwoerd, Erica Theron, Anna de Klerk, Hendrik Verwoerd Jr., Willem Verwoerd. One of his grandchildren, Wilhelm Verwoerd, later became a vocal critic of apartheid and broke with the family's legacy, and Elsabe Mering. Verwoerd's family was deeply rooted in Afrikaner nationalism, which influenced his development of apartheid as a means to sustain white minority rule in South Africa. Role in apartheid. Apartheid was a system of institutionalized racial segregation and discrimination in South Africa. Although racial discrimination and segregation existed in South Africa long before Verwoerd, he is credited with systematizing and implementing these policies on a large scale when he was Prime Minister. His policies entrenched white supremacy and severely curtailed the rights of the non-white majority. These laws affected where people could live, work, and whom they could marry. In summary, Hendrik Verwoerd, a Dutch-born Afrikaner, was the chief architect of apartheid. His education was locally supported, with no specific major funders being cited. His family, particularly his children, had varied stances, with some descendants later rejecting the apartheid ideology. Hendrik Verwoerd pursued his education at several prestigious institutions. At Stellenbosch University in South Africa, Verwoerd studied and completed his undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. He was a brilliant student, obtaining a Bachelor of Arts and a Master of Arts in psychology. He then went on to earn a doctorate in psychology and philosophy. After completing his PhD at Stellenbosch, Verwoerd pursued further studies abroad. He conducted postgraduate research in psychology at universities in Germany, specifically in Leipzig and Hamburg, as well as in the United Kingdom and the United States. His time in Germany exposed him to various ideas, including social sciences, and potentially nationalist ideologies that later influenced his thinking. Verwoerd's academic background played a role in shaping his methodical approach to apartheid policies during his political career. Hendrik Verwoerd's family was not wealthy. They were of modest means, reflecting the typical Afrikaner farming and working-class community at the time. Verwoerd's family emigrated from the Netherlands to South Africa in 1903, when he was just 2 years old. They settled in the Orange Free State, driven partly by economic hardship in the Netherlands, suggesting they were not a wealthy family. In South Africa, Verwoerd's family lived a relatively simple life. His father was involved in the Dutch Reformed Church and worked as a missionary, which typically did not bring in significant wealth. Verwoerd grew up in a religious and nationalist Afrikaner household, but there is no indication that they were financially well off. Verwoerd's academic success and later rise to political prominence were not the result of family wealth, but rather his intellectual abilities, hard work, and alignment with Afrikaner nationalist ideals. His education was supported through scholarships and his academic achievements, particularly at Stellenbosch University. There is limited specific information available about the exact scholarships Hendrik Verwoerd received during his academic career. However, it is known that his education was supported by academic scholarships due to his exceptional academic performance, particularly at Stellenbosch University. While details about the exact scholarship foundations he benefited from are scarce, here's some context regarding the likely sources of support. Stellenbosch University, like other South African universities at the time, would have provided merit-based scholarships to outstanding students. Verwoerd was academically brilliant, which likely earned him financial support from the university itself. Verwoerd was part of the Afrikaner nationalist community, and it is possible that he received support from organizations linked to Afrikaner interests, which were keen on fostering educated leaders for their political and cultural agenda. The Afrikaner Broederbond, a secretive and powerful organization, later played a significant role in promoting Afrikaner interests, though Verwoerd's involvement with them likely came later in his career. For his postgraduate studies in Germany, the UK, and the US, it is likely that Verwoerd received scholarships or grants, possibly from institutions abroad or through South African educational grants aimed at supporting exceptional students studying internationally. However, the exact nature of these awards is not well documented. While there is no clear public record of specific foundations that funded Verwoerd's education, his academic achievements and standing as a top student likely opened doors to various forms of financial assistance. What was the main agenda of the regime from his perspective and the party's? Hendrik Verwoerd's regime and the National Party which he led had a clear and rigid agenda centered around apartheid, or the institutionalized system of racial segregation and discrimination in South Africa. From Verwoerd's perspective and that of the National Party, the main agenda can be broken down into several key points. Apartheid, or racial separation, was promoted by Verwoerd under the guise of separate development. He framed it as a system where different racial groups could develop independently. However, in reality, it was a strategy to maintain white supremacy. The underlying goal was to ensure that the white minority, particularly the Afrikaner population, remained politically and economically dominant over the black majority and other racial groups. One of Verwoerd's main policies was the creation of Bantustans, or so-called independent homelands, for the black African population. The idea was to separate black South Africans into ethnically defined regions that were supposedly self-governing. This policy sought to strip black South Africans of their citizenship in white South Africa, marginalizing them politically and economically while reserving urban areas and wealthier parts of the country for the white population. Verwoerd and the National Party were deeply rooted in Afrikaner nationalism. This ideology sought to promote the interests and identity of the Afrikaner people, who were descendants of Dutch settlers. The National Party viewed Afrikaners as the rightful rulers of South Africa, and saw apartheid as a way to preserve their cultural and political dominance. The National Party sought to strengthen the Afrikaner economy and culture, building Afrikaner-controlled institutions such as banks, businesses, schools, and churches. They wanted to ensure that Afrikaners were not subordinated to the English-speaking white minority in South Africa. Apartheid policies ensured that the best land, jobs, and economic opportunities were reserved for the white minority. Black South Africans were often restricted to low-wage labor and menial jobs. Verwoerd also pushed for policies that would protect the white working class from competition with non-whites in industries such as mining, manufacturing, and agriculture. Political control and disenfranchisement of non-whites. Verwoerd's government passed laws that ensured that non-white South Africans had no political power in the central government. They were systematically disenfranchised through laws such as the Population Registration Act of 1950 and the Group Areas Act of 1950, which defined racial categories and separated people into distinct areas based on race. By stripping black South Africans of their citizenship and creating the illusion of independence in the Bantustans, Verwoerd aimed to remove black political claims on South Africa. This was a major part of his strategy to neutralize opposition to apartheid. Oppression and suppression of dissent. The apartheid regime under Verwoerd was brutal in its suppression of political dissent, particularly from anti-apartheid movements like the African National Congress, the Pan-Africanist Congress, and other resistance organizations. The regime implemented strict security laws, including the Suppression of Communism Act of 1950, to arrest and detain those who opposed apartheid. Leaders like Nelson Mandela and other prominent anti-apartheid figures were imprisoned during Verwoerd's rule. International isolation and justification. Despite growing international condemnation of apartheid, Verwoerd's government sought to justify apartheid as a legitimate policy of self-determination for different racial groups. He attempted to frame apartheid as a way for each racial group to manage its own affairs separately. However, this justification failed to gain widespread acceptance, and South Africa became increasingly isolated on the international stage, with many countries boycotting or sanctioning the regime. Afrikaner religious ideology. Verwoerd's policies were also influenced by a deeply religious worldview, particularly within the context of the Dutch Reformed Church. Some Afrikaner leaders believed that apartheid was part of a divine plan to protect the purity of the Afrikaner people. This religious justification played a significant role in maintaining support for apartheid among Afrikaners. In summary, the main agenda of Hendrik Verwoerd and the National Party was to maintain white minority rule, primarily through the policy of apartheid. Verwoerd envisioned a South Africa where different racial groups were separated geographically, politically, and economically, with the white population holding the dominant position. The apartheid system was designed to ensure the economic and political dominance of white South Africans, especially Afrikaners, while suppressing and marginalizing the non-white population. Through strict segregation, disenfranchisement of black South Africans, and a harsh police state, Verwoerd sought to cement the idea of racial hierarchy and Afrikaner nationalism at the heart of South African society.